Good morning. My name is Steve Weber. I am the host of the American Gumption Morning Show, and it's being brought to you here on Spirituality Gone Wild, and also broadcasting on the American Gumption Facebook page and also the American Gumption YouTube channel. So please do subscribe. We're growing and we're gaining momentum, as they say. So today is Wednesday, September 16th, 2020. And hey, I also know that fall begins next Tuesday. So less than a week from now, summer is officially over. So I've been, for the first time since 1979, I spent an entire summer on the East Coast, and we went through the heat and humidity of the summer. And now that's coming to an end. Our mornings are cooler. So we're entering into the fall season, and it feels great. And in fact, I had to put on an extra shirt today just because it's a little chilly in the broadcast studio. So anyway, today we have a guest, Natalie Coleman, and it's a story of recovery that'll be coming up in about 10 or so minutes. And I'm going to do a little short monologue on forgiveness. So forgiveness is what the title of it'll be, and it's really about self-forgiveness. That's the hint. So I'm going to jump into that in just a minute. Now, I had to pull an audible at the very last minute. I have been trying to I kind of gave up on life lessons from the movie for a little bit because I was using the YouTube feed and I wasn't happy with the way they were being shown on the air. I realized that the volume was way too low, and so that wasn't working. And then I thought I had the answer, and I've put all of the life lessons into the cloud, and they're going to be on my members website. And so I thought, hey, I can just stream them right from that. But the problem is it just doesn't come out nice and smooth. It's sort of choppy. I tried it the last 2 days and it didn't work. So I had to pull the plug on it. So then today I thought, now I know how to do it. And I ended up, just like 10 minutes before the show started, I went, hey, it's not going to work. And so I had to pull the plug, and it was a great one, but it'll be a great one when we bring it up in a couple of days or weeks from now, whenever it's appropriate. We'll bring it back and we'll use that one. Alrighty. So I wanted to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of those things that I had to learn in my life, and over the years I had things that happened to me that I would blame others and be mad about. And I can remember one particular thing that when I went into business in the early 90s, where I became a self-employed commission-only salesperson in 1990 or 91. I'm fuzzy on the date at the moment. And so anyway, I remember the gentleman that I went and was partnered with at the time. It just didn't work the way he described it going to work. And I ended up believing that it would work if I just followed his formula. And he convinced me that that's the way it was going to work. And so I remember for a couple of year period, I was very angry about the fact that it didn't work out the way it was supposed to work out. I was doing what I was told to do, but it wasn't working. And so I came to, now I can look back on it and realize that, I was the one who wasn't, making it work. And his formula, nothing really inherently wrong with it. It just didn't work for me that way. But I was young, and I was, a little bit naive about how business and life works. And, ultimately, you need to own whatever it is that you are doing in life. And so I didn't really take full ownership. I was allowing his vision to be what I was adopting and owning. The same kind of thing happened when I finished my career at Bubba Gump and really started developing my speaking message. And I joined the NSA, the National Speakers Association, and there were a lot of good things that happened from that. Met a lot of great people. But I also started to, I ended up getting coaches and different people worked from, and there began to become like a pattern of like, this is how you're supposed to do this business. And I guess being the thinker and organizer that I am, I said, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. And so I ended up listening to everybody else's ideas and then kind of concluding that this is how it works. And when it didn't really work that way, I remember being, again, angry and annoyed with the fact that, hey, these people said it would work this way, and it didn't work that way. So as I did the personal development work, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, that time frame, I ultimately came to the conclusion and the realization that all of the anger and times when I was annoyed and blaming, let's just call it, and maybe it wasn't even anger, maybe that's a little too strong, but blaming and annoyance and me being a little bit of a victim as a result of like advice that I had received, that I needed to own it, and I needed to take responsibility for that. So as this became a realization, I remember feeling a bit overwhelmed with, like, what would it be? Guilt or grief or just the awakening, like where you look in the mirror and you go, oh my gosh, it's me. It's not necessarily everybody else. In fact, it's not them at all. It's me. And so for me, forgiveness became my own having to forgive myself. And so once you can forgive yourself, then there is no need to forgive anyone else. And so ultimately, that's what forgiveness comes down to me, is learning to forgive oneself for one's past, and of course, learning to be more in the present moment, and not worrying about so much what happened in the past, just accepting it and looking at it like, hey, that was a good thing. That what was the lesson that I got from that? What did I learn? How did that experience help me move along? And so the whole idea of blame kind of disappears when you can forgive yourself, because there is, if you're not angry with them, or if you're not annoyed with them, or if you're not, holding them somehow responsible for what happened to you, then there is nothing to forgive them about. And so for me, forgiveness really became about myself, forgiving myself. So that's really the message that I wanted to share with you this morning. I'm just looking at my notes. The only other thing I might add is that, it's like it's finally coming to the point where you admit the truth. And the truth is, of course, that, we are responsible for the life we create. A big, huge fan of law of attraction. What we think about, comes into our lives. And so that's the spirit of how I like to live my life these days. Now, of course, it's, we're all works in progress. And that's another piece of forgiveness. We are all works in progress. We're constantly, bettering ourselves and improving, and using each day as an experience to somehow learn and to move along. And so if we can find that joy in each and every day, and then life becomes a whole lot simpler and more fun. So that's my message on forgiveness today. It's really all about forgiving yourself. And once you forgive yourself, then there really isn't anyone else that has to be forgiven, because our interpretation of what they did is really all that matters. And once we forgive ourselves, then other people, what they do doesn't make any difference, really. So that's it. I think I'm going to go ahead. Our guest is in the green room. I see the American Gumption host and hostesses have been taking care of her, pampering her while she's backstage. She looks like she's ready. She's had some tea to warm herself up, although where she's coming from, it's afternoon tea. It's not morning tea. So let's bring our guest, Natalie Coleman, to the American Gumption Morning Show. Good morning, or good afternoon, Natalie.
Good afternoon to you, my dear Steve. How are you? I have to say,
doing great. Thank you.
Right, your people really do know how to look after the guests in the green room, because the fruit bowl and the nuts were just stunning. And I do love green tea, so that was perfect. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. So what the way our first time guests work here on the American Gumption Morning Show is I read a little bit of a bio and introduction, and then I play a special tune that welcomes them. And this tune is only for first time guests. So if you come back and join us, Natalie, in the future, you'll never get to hear this again. Is that sound fair?
I'll embrace this. I'll embrace this. Thank you. I've been excited about this.
Excellent. All right. So here's just a little introduction with Natalie, and then we'll get into her story after the welcoming band marches through. So Natalie Coleman is in love with this thing called life. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, 4 to 6 years ago, Natalie was in a very different place. She was in darkness. Her path to darkness wasn't a short path. It was a long path. But in 2016, she was able to return to the light through the love of family, professional help, and her own awakening or rebirth. Today, Natalie is on a mission to shine her light on others. One of the ways she does this is by hosting her own weekly show on Speak Up and Empower. Speak Up and Empower is an online membership-based community of women and men that are heart-centered and are searching for more in their lives. And that's what we're all about here in the American Gumption Morning Show. It's helping people find more in their lives. Yeah. So Natalie's show is called Real Talk, Steps to Serenity with Natalie Coleman, and it airs on Mondays at 8 p.m. in the UK, 3 p.m. On the East Coast, and 12 noon in California in the Pacific. Natalie is originally from Johannesburg, South Africa, but has called Kent, England, or the UK, her home for most of her adult life. That part I wasn't 100% sure of, but I just threw that in there. So if it matters when you move there, you'll let us know. She is the mother to a 17-year-old lovely young lady and the wife to an immensely patient and kind man. So Natalie Coleman, welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show.
Wow, what an introduction.
And now we will play your welcome song.
You are so clever. That is amazing. Thank you.
Have you ever had a marching band welcome you onto a show, either as your own show or a guest?
Steve, hand on heart, never. There is a first for everything. And thank you. You're very special.
Well, good. I once more, we have an international flavor to the American Gumption Morning Show, and I've shared this a few times, but one of the things that I thought about when I was very close to launching was I need to change the name to Global Gumption because Gumption is really a worldwide movement and not just an American thing. But I ended up deciding to keep it with American Gumption just because I figure I'll be traveling and working primarily from the United States, but I want to at least acknowledge that you are part of both the American Gumption and the global Gumption community. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love your show, and I love your work, and what you're doing is just incredible. It's inspiring and great fun.
Well, thank you. You're kind. And I will mention that I was a guest on, the way we met was I was a guest on Natalie's show a few weeks ago. So that's when we first got to know each other.
We did indeed. And got a lot of love for that show. Inspired a lot of people. Yeah. My family over in Northern Ireland. Ireland. Were almost drawn to tears, moved by, just how meaningful and wise your words were. It was great fun, and it was lovely. And thank you again for coming onto my show.
Well, you're very, very welcome. You have a story, and I would like you to take 7 or 10 minutes, and just lay the foundation of what your life was like, 10 years ago up until about 6 years ago, 4 years ago, when you went into recovery. Tell us how you were, your life kind of spiraled out of control, and then what you did to regain that control.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah. So, wow. I'd just like to say, my story is very much about recovery and what I've gained in my life as a result of it. What I can say, and I actually heard this expression just a little while ago, and it really stuck with me, and that is, our issues are in our tissues. And that really, as I say, that really stuck with me, because I did experience as a young girl, childhood trauma, and I had a lot of emotion and sort of unsolved emotional issues that I hadn't processed properly, and I carried that with me for a lot of my life. As I say, I got to sort of adulthood when I could have taken responsibility, and as you were talking about just earlier on, taken ownership of the dark place that mentally found myself in for much of my life. But I didn't do that, and from a young age, I developed coping mechanisms, coping tools that were totally self-destructive. So in an environment that I was living in that was wholly out of control for a very young girl, my sort of means of coping with it and escaping what was going on was I developed an eating disorder. I developed anorexia from a very young age. And that was sort of my first delusional comfort blanket that I carried around with me from a young age. And then as I got older, I discovered alcohol. And from the first drink that I took, well, I had a drink at quite a young age, because it was what you did in South Africa, and alcohol was always around, always available. But my first proper drink that I had, I was about 13, and I drank to complete blackout, made myself really, really ill, but it didn't scare me in the slightest. And I pretty much drank alcoholically from a very young age. Despite that, I always did all right in life. I did well at school. I achieved on the sports field. My nature was trying to just be more than I was really internally, because I didn't really know what I had no sort of solid foundation, solid base. So, and this is all retrospectively understanding my behaviors through my life. So I went through life always achieving, and winning awards, and I went to university, and I got good jobs, and despite the inner tormenting monologue that was in my, within me, I did okay. But not only that tormenting monologue, and really, really low self-esteem. Besides all that, I was, I found a solution that helped me to escape and more easily be somebody that I wasn't, and that was alcohol, in vast amounts, and then eventually drugs as well. Now, the really peak of, shall we say, my drinking, or the most chronic that my alcoholism became, was probably around about 2013. Really, really started to get out of control. But before that, yes, I was, I was drinking far, far, far more than is normal, or that the average person should drink. So there was clearly something, wrong with my my inability to moderate from a young age. And so, but the thing is that I never really experienced disastrous consequences as a result of it. Yes, I caused a lot of trouble and there was pain and everything, but I hadn't, until I started to get to that tail end of it, sort of 6-7 years ago, where the deck of cards was starting to fall down. I managed to function as a relatively successful person. So, yeah, as we were saying earlier on, it really got out of control, sort of 2013, 2014. And in 2015, it became apparent that my inability to have addressed those issues that I should have as a youngster and as an adult growing up really started to fester, and my eating disorder came and took over with such a vengeance. It really did, and my alcoholism started to get out of control. So I had these two demons in my head that were just constantly fighting for airtime, and but they were still in the most delusionally bizarre, sick way. They were still helping me and serving me in some kind of way to get through life. Because especially the substance abuse, I couldn't function without it, and eventually got to the point where I couldn't function with or without it. And it was then that my physical health really got to a desperate stage. And I don't say this because I want to paint a picture of what a badass I was or anything like that, but I just want to illustrate the degradation that I had put myself through, and the point of almost no return that I'd taken myself before I decided, with the help of everybody that you spoke about, to go and get help. I, in beginning of, or the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, I'm 5'10" and some change, and I weighed less than 90 pounds. I was mentally deranged. I spiritually completely bankrupt. There was just nothing left of me besides a shell of a human being. It was like almost, those characters you see in The Walking Dead. And like I say, I'm not trying to, be some kind of, badass, but it was desperate. And try as the health services here, try as they may to help me in the UK. I don't think I was ready for help. My issues were so complex, and I was lying to everybody that was trying to help me that I couldn't be helped by the services here. And my family got wind of how, what level it had got to back in South Africa. They're all living in South Africa. And and they made a huge effort and made big sacrifices to put me on a plane in 2016, end of July 2016, to go out and get private treatment at the wonderful Houghton House in South Africa. So that undoubtedly not only saved my life, which it actually physically did, because the doctors did not see me making it anywhere near Christmas 2016 if I had carried on in any way that I was. And not only did it save my life, but it was the start of a new life that I just never even knew existed. And so I think it was the 28th or 29th of July, something 2016, I landed in South Africa, and my family were mortified. My brother couldn't even drive the car. He was so freaked out by what he saw. And I went straight to the treatment facility, and I stayed there for 3 months. I was in the program for 3 months. So when I arrived, I had to be detoxed again. I just want to say something else. That so dire was my condition. I had experienced life-threatening seizures as a result of the starvation and the alcohol. So they were quite nervous to take me in because of my physical, how I was physically. But they said, right, let's just get her, onto some medication detox. Let's try and get her on a drip and get some, or some nourishment through her and everything. And after a week, I kind of, I came to, and I joined the program, so to speak. And that was, the start of a painful journey of self-discovery, because what I started to uncover without the assistance of a mind-numbing substance wasn't pretty. Steve, it was not pretty. And, there were times when
Let me just stop you. Thank you for, sharing where you had been. And I think the reason, and I know you a bit for the last, month or so, and you're not saying this for any type of self-pity or,
no.
Like, whoa, look at me. You're sharing this because the reality was you were in a dark place, and you were, the life was drawn from you. It was gone, and you were not a happy person. You were not among the living. You were like you were like the Walking Dead at that point in time. And so, you think about the people, and we'll get into this, your husband and your daughter, and the fact that they were, witnessing all of this, and, you weren't even in your right mind at that moment in time. And so then, you mentioned the fact that there was attempts at help in the UK, but, ultimately you just needed to be removed from that, environment to kind of wake you up. And
really. Yeah.
So then you go into the treatment, and I understand it's about a 3-month period. And you mentioned when I interrupted, you mentioned that got your system flushed out, and you could at least begin to rationally focus on what the reality of your situation was. You looked in the mirror, and you didn't like what you saw in terms of not from a, I'm sure from a physical point of view, you were worn out. You said your brother was, in shock over your physical condition. But really what it was looking at, who you had been and who you had become. And then of course what that was, but these were professional people, and they helped you to go through it. So go ahead and just share a bit more about the treatment and that professional help, because it's you needed it at that point. You didn't have much you didn't have an option to try to do this on your own at that moment in time. You needed some professional help.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, absolutely. So, the most, some of the most wonderful, professional, compassionate people that I've ever met, and extremely skilled at what they do in helping people in addiction, and recovering from trauma and all of that. And so it was a 12-step recovery facility, recovery treatment center. So that's something, a whole other world of beauty and joy. But so there was a lot of a lot of help in the 12 steps. But you asked about the people. The counselor, the therapist, the professional that was assigned to me, that had the honor of having kind of helped me scramble through the mess. I'm still in touch with today, but at the time I was petrified of her, because she called a spade, and she wasn't scared to hold the mirror up to me and kind of make me look in it. Now, I was petrified of her because I was petrified of life. I was petrified of everything. And Nikki, who was my counselor, she's one of the most influential people I've ever met. And there's not many days that go by when I don't think of something that she said, and I'll be forever grateful for that. But I think the process of having to learn to talk. Now, I grew up in an environment where and sort of a home where you don't talk, and it was, I think it was very much like that 47 years ago. You don't talk, and I just never being really allowed to express myself and everything. I'm not alone in this, in the world, but talking aloud, sharing my feelings, expressing myself, and standing up for myself was never something that came naturally to me. I was never able to do it. So the process of starting to talk about my feelings and admit my wrongs and admit where I was in my life was really, really difficult. And so the combination of some tough love from Nikki and her colleagues. Nikki helped me so much as well with my self-esteem and the eating disorders. So I was fighting the two things while I was there. I was so angry that they were making me actually eat and follow a regime of proper eating and a proper diet, and then not having anything to fall on to take that pain away in terms of the alcohol. She really helped me. So her, the other professionals, and then being introduced to the 12-step recovery program, it blended a sort of a spiritual element of which I was entirely devoid all my life, atheist to the end. The professionalism, the spiritual side, and the group engagement. So I learned to start to trust people, to talk to people. I wasn't very good at it, actually, to be fair, looking back, because I didn't really offer that much of myself in group, because I couldn't determine what they were going to think of me, because all I ever worried about was what people were thinking of me, and I'd tell them what I think they wanted to hear, and spent my life manipulating people like that and manipulating situations. And so I didn't use it to its, to its maximum potential, but I started to get into the process, and so it did a lot to get me to health, to get sober, get clean, to start to look at me and realize what a mess I had come to make of my life, and the amount of people that I'd hurt just by the exercises that we did and the processes that we went through. Now, so that was for 3 months, and You know, I was so full of it, Steve. I was so full of it. I thought I'd done an absolutely sterling job of it, really. This is how delusional I was. Because, you know, all the work that we were assigned, it looked amazing. And, you could send it to an editor to be published, all that nonsense that, the superficial stuff that I hang on to because I had nothing inside. So I thought I'd done a sterling job and done all right, left after 3 months. And
let me just stop you. You had so up until you had went into the treatment, you had a job and you excelled at it. You had a life, and to many people on the surface, other than in the last couple of years when it kind of spiraled out of control, you had this life that was going on. You were functioning. You were busy functioning, doing all these different things. To the average person, most of your life was, like a storybook, or it was a perfectly fine life. Everybody has some problems, but, not a big deal. And so then it's funny because you managed your 3 months in treatment almost identically, where you went in and you kind of did a little fakeroo with them, where you went and did your exercises perfectly, but there was a bit of an underlying problem, wasn't there?
Steve, you've hit the nail on the head. I took those behaviors straight into treatment with me. Didn't have the alcohol in me, still fighting eating, but getting food into me. And you're right, I just took those behaviors straight into the treatment center. That's such an accurate summation of what I did. Absolutely. I had so many secrets still that were still keeping me sick. And so, when I left treatment, I went, so this is all in South Africa, in Johannesburg. I was staying with my family, who are all out there. It was just so amazing to be with them. And I'll tell you how grateful I was to have them do what they did for me. And it still makes my stomach turn sometimes. So I come out and full of the joys of life. And within 5 days, I just thought it would be a super idea to just go and do a little bit more research on a bottle of vodka, Now, who does that? Who does that? And the way in which I went and got the drink was exactly the same way that I used to hide and deceive people and and manipulate the way that I do it here in the UK all through, those dark years. And I literally went straight back to old behavior without even considering other people, what the consequences may be, how much people had trusted. It was, it was shameful. It was shameful. But again, my family, they were pretty broken. I'll never forget the tears in my sister's eyes when she found out what I'd done that day. But that day, they put me straight back into the same treatment facility. And I barely remember going back in. I'd just had so much to drink. It was horrendous. And it was then going back in for that second time that everything changed. Everything changed. It was. So that was at the beginning of November. The first, my clean date is the 2nd of November 2016, and I was put back in on the 1st, and it was from then that, by the grace of God and the people that loved and supported me, everything started to change. And I say that because I'd been in much worse physical conditions before, much, much worse, but there was something emotionally broken inside of me and so decimated by what I had done to other people, and that feeling of being back in that, right outside the gates of hell again, it was just too much to bear. And I knew I was done. I knew I was done. And the most beautiful thing happened. I mean, I was still, for the first couple of days that I was in, and of course I had Nikki again as my counselor, and she just tut-tutted. She just went, because I was still trying, the first couple of days, still trying to manipulate things and hold on to my phone, which I wasn't allowed to have, still full of it, And she just said, Natalie, you're still in such denial. I just, when is this ever going to change? And but a few days later, it was the 6th of November, in the midst of trying to control people, manipulate, get in touch with my family in South Africa, and I mean, over here, so I was in South Africa. Something just happened, and again, a mirror was held up in front of me by one of the counselors, and the walls just broke down. The tears started flooding, and I had what I believe was a profound spiritual experience where I just knew that everything was going to be okay. That regardless of if my husband took me back or if I had a home or whatever, I knew that I was going to be okay, because I just knew I was done, and I didn't have to do that stuff anymore. And I knew that I could ask for help, and I knew I didn't have to do it on my own anymore. And I started to pay attention, get out of my own way. But I'll just never forget that overwhelming feeling of peace. And so many people have different experiences in recovery, and how they, have their spiritual experiences or profound changes. And sometimes they take a longer than others and stuff. But my experience was profoundly immediate, and it has grown and continues to be a spiritual growth and experience. But that 6th of November 2016, it was around about 3:30 in the afternoon, actually. I just so vividly remember it. Everything changed. And the things I knew, subconsciously or consciously, whatever it was, I knew then that as I walked out that office, the counselor's office, I knew that the one thing that would have to change is everything. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't scared. I wasn't intimidated by it, because I knew that I just had to do it in little bits and pieces and keep myself in the present and start to make those changes, which I started to do.
Yeah.
And I left treatment after I was in for another few weeks, deeply humbled by that, because the girl that was in the advanced stages of treatment and done so well is back with the newbies in detox sort of thing. So I had to really bite humble pie, and but it was okay, because it was okay. I didn't mind doing it, whereas before I'd have been so full of myself and blaming everybody. And I came back to the UK at the beginning of December 2016. And there began the true journey of recovery. Yeah. Living life on life's terms.
This is a great story that you're sharing. And what it shows is that a person can change, yes, but they do have to look into the mirror. They do have to decide to change. And everybody comes to that conclusion at their own time and space when they're ready to do it. So, thank you for sharing that. I've known you for almost a month now, and we've talked on several occasions. And there was always a joy and bubbliness and life in you. And you took us back and you showed us a little bit of what that dark phase was all about. So I think we have a pretty good idea of that. Our conversations, the last few times that we've talked, have always been kind of on that joyful realm of recovery, and in like going deep in a different area. So there's a couple of different areas that I'd like to, I kind of like to shift it. I mean, I wanted to give people a sense, and I thank you for sharing, what it was that got you here, but you became alive again. So when you went back to the UK in December of 2016, you were like a new person. I mean, how did your husband and daughter react to you when you showed up again? I mean, what was that like? And what was those first, I mean, there was obviously some cleaning up that needed to be done, but how did that go initially?
Yeah, Steve, that's a really good question, actually, because I mean, how do you react when someone when you saw, well, number one, my husband had resigned to himself to the fact that I might never come back. So, that man had to deal with so much, and but so painful for him and for my daughter at a young age. She was only 12, 13 then. Witnessing what she did, but my husband protected her from a lot of what was really going on. Mm-hmm. We have a great relationship now, my daughter and I, and we can talk about these things and help her to identify if that sort of thing is going around in her circles of friends. But so I think it took a while. I couldn't come back to the UK and expect everything to be great. Look, everybody, I'm well now. I've got back. And so, you need to be on my level because look, I've changed. And that process of his own recovery from the trauma that he experienced, I underestimated for a long time. And it took its toll. It's taken its toll at times on our relationship. And I've often not given him enough credit for what he had to go through to keep the ball spinning, to keep the house going, to keep things from completely collapsing around us. So I think, he was a combination of joy, but distrust, skepticism. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a little confusing. And my daughter also took her a while to kind of, who's this new person? She looks okay. And but I appreciated that, and I didn't want to bombard them with promises of this is never going to happen again. And I just, what I had to do was just say to myself, let my actions do the talking. And one day at a time, I will start to embrace all these beautiful things we'll talk about of recovery, one day at a time. And there's some things I'll be making a lifetime amends for. And But yeah, people underestimate what the families go through when people are in addiction. Mm-hmm. We think we go through trauma. Try speaking to the families and the carers. It's really hard, but we work through. We're working through those sort of problems that have kind of rear their heads every now and again. And I think because I'm able to communicate now, that's one of the joys of recovery. I'm not the best communicator, and I've got a lot to learn, but I'm learning to speak more about what's on my chest. He might think that I'm not the best because he really is an open dialogue, but to talk. And if I need to, I do. And we manage to, a lot of the time, get to what's going on. And so our relationship is taking new dimensions. And you spoke of, let's just, what, I love that. I love especially what is, freedom, living in freedom every day. People often ask, what does recovery mean to you? And that word freedom just is the first thing that comes to my mind. Living, it's funny, and we were chatting about this. It's freedom from me to a very large degree, because this person was making the wrong decisions on tricky ground for so long. Freedom from me, freedom from the bondage of self, and and my delusional thinking. But like we were saying yesterday, it's a bit of a paradox, because freedom from myself, but at the same time, one of the next joys of recovery has been discovering myself, because I never knew who I was. And I used to hate when people say, oh, just be yourself. And I was like, I don't even know who I am. But I'm beginning to understand that I'm just the person I was always meant to be, and that if I apply common decency and amenable principles in my life, I can be the person that I was always meant to be. And excuse me, you might have to talk for a second, because I need a sip of water.
Go ahead and give yourself a break here. We're actually we're getting close to the end. We'll only have a few more minutes to speak. So what I'd like to do is, and I have like 5 or 6 or 7 more topics I wanted to talk to you about. So what I think I'd like to do is invite you to come back to the American Gumption morning show, and we could talk about some of those. And so we'll look at our schedules, when this is over, and if we can work it out, we'd like to bring you back and go deeper into that, because really these other topics are freedom, living without fear, relationships, forgiveness, attitude of gratitude, being teachable, honesty, love. All of those are areas that I know we could go, and they're the joy. They're the fun parts.
That's where life is, in the truths of life. I would, I'd love to do that, and more so because, Steve, I just hope that that this hour that we've had together, that there is a message out there to people that are watching. It doesn't matter how hopeless, how far down the scale you've gone of self-destruction, recovery is possible. And that's why I mentioned the where I'd come from. And I say that if I could do it, and anybody can do it. It is so possible. And then the gifts and the promises of the joys of life that come with it are just, there is no money that could pay me to go back to where I was. Just someone said, would you go and have a drink? Would you like a drink? I'll give you a lot of money. And there is no amount of money that could replace the feeling that I have as a result of this new life. And like you were saying, learning to forgive. And I love what you're talking about, that self-forgiveness. Learning to love myself took a long time, really took a long time. And it's not an easy thing to do, but one day you just go, you know what, life's going to be a lot easier if I learn to live with myself and quite like me. It'll be a lot easier, because if I like me, I'm not having to fight internally against myself. So life just becomes so much easier. It's a pretty cool place to be, learning to love ourselves, learning to live in gratitude, not expecting, learning to forgive. You spoke about blame that we did all of our lives. Oh my God, blame people, places, and things for everything that had gone wrong. No. And like you said, taking ownership and responsibility for me and my actions. All of these things, just all add to emotional sobriety, which is what the goal is, being able to live an emotionally sober life, and learning to be honest.
Thank you. I feel like, and I didn't want to interject too much of my own story in with yours, but there's a couple of parallels that I do need to share.
Yeah.
I became someone who drank beer 25 years every day, maybe longer, and it was always a transition thing for me, like from the work day to the, to the relaxing time. And somehow I equated, I needed this to relax. And I knew it was a habit and a bad habit. And we'll call it an addiction. And because I couldn't stop myself from doing that. And multiple times I tried to, quit, moderate, slow down, and I wasn't able to do it. I just, I was addicted. And so ironically, your date you said was the 2nd of November. And for me, my date is the 21st of December, that same year, 2016. So,
yeah.
And once I quit, once I made the decision, it's like there's no going back. And the thing that was the key for me is I realized that I had more freedom without drinking, because I didn't have to worry about what I was going to do every night at 5 o'clock, and where I was going to be and how I was going to drive home. And, and of course it was like all kinds of, behaviors that were like, I was on like I was like being pulled by a string or something into doing things that I didn't really want to do, or I didn't find joy in doing. And so it was a physical addiction for sure.
Yeah.
And it was an emotional addiction. So it's both of those things. So I think what I'd like to do is invite you to come back, and we could talk about some of these things in deeper. The freedom is so important, but the fear and the relationships, forgiveness, gratitude. I had my own experience with, I called it coachable. You called it teachable. I mean, if you can't listen and learn from others, and yet we become blind to that sort of thing. And then of course the good ones, honesty, love, they don't happen until you get to some of those. So that's so I think that's what I'd like to do. I go ahead and just say a last word or two. And then we'll wrap up this show, and then we'll get you to come back, and we'll go deeper on some of those other topics.
It'd be my honor, Steve. It really, really would. I'd love to do that.
And go ahead and share one last message about the hope that people, from that dark point in your life to where you now are living in the light and with joy again. I mean, anybody who's in a dark place, what's your message to them?
Yeah. So my message to anybody, and this is so close to my heart because it's my experience, is that talk. It doesn't matter that you might be afraid to be speaking about what is going on, what pain you're experiencing. And when I say speak to somebody, it doesn't have to be a professional or a counselor or something. Speak to somebody that you trust. It could be a friend, it could be a sibling, it could be even somebody that you've only met recently, that you've struck a relationship with. But get the words out and speak about what's going on inside, because I never did that, and it had catastrophic ending. Speak about it. There is always help out there, because somebody does care. And if I had done that from a very young age, things would have looked a bit different, but they didn't. But now I can say, do that before it leads to masking and medicating the problem.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Natalie, for joining us today. Afternoon for you. We'll look at our schedules, and we'll see if we can't. We'll see if we can't work it out. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. And again, I think there's more that we need to talk about this, because now it's really kind of the juicy parts. Because once you get on the road to recovery, there's that joy of life. And I appreciate that you peeled back the curtain and allowed us to just understand where you came from. And this interview will stand as that portion, and we'll just let it be what it is, and we'll move forward, and we'll forgive all of those, and for ourselves, and we'll just move forward with it.
Sounds like a plan, Steve. It would be my honor, really. Love your work.
All right. Well, thank you again. So we'll be in touch, and thank you very much, Natalie, for joining us
Thank
this
you
morning.
so much, Steve, and we'll speak to you soon. And thanks, everybody.
All right. So
Wow, that was amazing.
Thank you to Natalie. I'm going to go ahead and play the closing song here. We'll wrap up. That was a great conversation that we had. I appreciate her joining us from Kent in the UK, and we'll come back and we'll do it again tomorrow, folks. So everybody have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow here on the American Gumption Show.